I said, then you're going to move them over. He said, no, we're not. I said, why not? He said, because we want to spend that money. Because the only reason the legislature meets every year is so they can come up with some new legislation that always costs money, so they can do their little end zone dance, get the picture in the paper, and run on that for the next election. He said, that's the only reason. He said, it'll never be politically convenient to cut the budget $1.7 billion. Therefore, it'll never be, this 1.3 million W-2 wage earners will never get to the zero income tax status as promised by Brownback when he sold the plant. Okay? So, 191,000 people ride the bus for free, everybody else pays. That's not fair. That's the issue that's got most Kansas upset. The chart back there shows 47% of the job, 47% of people do not like Sam Brownback's tax plan. His approval rating is 30% or 33%. His disapproval rating is 47%, and the remainder is undecided. Well, turn those into numbers. 33% of the number of people who voted in the last election is 192,000 and some change. Wait a minute. 191,000 got their tax break. That's an awful close number. 47%, which is over 400,000 people who vote, are saying, you know, what up? You know, how's this fair? And if there's no plan to change it, then we need to change the government. And I think that is the number one thing that's going to, you know, put money in people's lives. Now, when you do averages, you lose perspective. But the average income tax that the average guy makes, and I don't know if there's an average person here, is $1,900 a year. It's not a tremendous amount of money. You're not going to go out and buy a car. But what you are going to do is you're going to use that $1,900 and you're going to go to Walmart and Target and Kmart and gas and tires. That's all consumable goods. The Kansas, Commerce Department says that each dollar we spend in Kansas turns over 7 times. So at a sales tax rate of 6.15, we get 6.15 off $1.7 billion 7 times. So the sales tax increase is going to skyrocket. We're going to move those over. Now, how is the governor going to do that? The governor has to be a stand-up guy. He can't be a get-along kind of guy. And so he's got to tell the legislature in the State Address, listen, nothing gets passed. Absolutely no bill gets passed. Every bill is vetoed until you bring that tax bill to me. And so if that doesn't happen, then we have a long 4 years of vetoing every bill.
King picked on my favorite department to pick on, the Department of Commerce. They spend $145 million per year, $845,000 of which is for trade development, coordination of business in Kansas. Thank you. Voters that I talk to don't talk to me about tax policy. I think I'm talking to different people than Keen is talking to. Keen is talking to business people. I'm talking to the rest of us that work for business people. And they are worried about medical insurance, medical bills, their sick relatives, jobs. There's a lot of people on unemployment who are floating between a few little jobs that are just barely making it by. I think that the answer is the cannabis hemp industry is going to make a huge difference in the lives of Kansans. The medicine possibilities alone is going to get a whole bunch of people out of bed, feeling good, up and out, and then consuming again. For all American capitalism, there's a lot of people that don't leave the house, that don't get to even go out and work because they are not feeling well enough. And modern medicine can't do anything for them. They've reached a point of no return. If we get people up and healthy, then they can contribute, and then they can no longer be the takers, the ones that have to take some aid from everybody else because they can't make it on their own. Also, the possibilities for research and other business development outside of the hemp in the cannabis industry. If anybody is watching the news, what's going on in Denver and Colorado, timeshares there, the value of those have to just skyrocketed, and everything is going up there. They're making so much money over there, and Kansas is going to start spending a lot of money to enforce our no law. I think it's going to offset things, and it'll be just part of the way that it all comes apart if we don't be proactive in changing our policy. I hate to have such a simple answer, but I think that if you don't have anything new going on, it doesn't matter any kind of tax policy or business policy you want to offer legislatively. I agree though with Keene's sentiment that I would go in there. Gary Johnson is one of my political heroes, and he was called Governor Veto. He was a 2-time governor of New Mexico, and he vetoed something like 75% of every bill that came across his desk because it did not meet his criteria. And I think that would be great. I think that I would go in there and hold them hostage and say, until we legislate this so that we can have some real economic growth and some actual money coming in to deal with, I don't sign anything. I think that that should happen in the first 100 days of the new governor's administration, the legalization, so that we can get up and start making some things happen in Kansas.
Getting back to the proper roles of government, the executive branch has a job to do, and if he acts as a goalie between the legislature and the people, I think that's his proper role. And a lot of the stuff coming out the last 2 legislative seasons is because Brownback has had too much influence over the Republican Party and over the legislature itself. His administration got a lot of moderates out because they weren't going to play ball with him. So now we have a very lopsided legislature. I was talking to Ron Highland, he's a Republican in the 51st District, and so I asked him at the beginning of the session, are you guys going to be still drinking Brownback's Kool-Aid is what I actually said to him. And he said, no, we're going to become more independent. I said, oh my God, that sounds like a moderate. No, independent, that's the same thing. You know, they know it too. Everybody's worried about what? Getting reelected. You know, as a governor, when you tell them what your priorities are, and they could come with a cure for cancer, it gets vetoed, because I told them, the first bill is we got to make this right. We can't keep taking money from people that are W-2 wage earners and not taking it from the wealthiest bunch, the 191,000. I'm not mad at the 191,000. I'm glad they got it. You know, we've had some real support for some unions lately because they say, well, wait a minute, we could put, you know, $3, $4, $5 back in the pockets of our employees, and the corporate W-2 wage earners, they're putting $12,000 to $14,000 back into their pocket, and they don't have to pay state income tax. And you know, when you think of how much money is going to go back in the economy and generate sales tax, because we have to generate sales tax, and I'm not a fair tax guy yet. I'm about halfway there. Fair tax is a zero tax. I'm all for zero tax. I'm not so big on the consumption part, the consumption tax, because it includes everybody. But at least it's something to think about.
So if we're talking about tax policy, I think that people want to know, well, what's your idea? Because obviously tax policy is just a mess. And I think that getting rid of the income tax is the first tax we should aim to get rid of. However we do it, it's the one that needs to go. It's the most expensive one to enforce. It's the most invasive one. And I think that it is the one that just spiritually, it's a kick in the gut. You got to give and take to the government. And I think that Kansans are willing to share and to give for the greater good, and they want to help their fellow man out. I think that they want to be able to get it. It should be a consumption tax. And the fair tax is a step in the right direction. I think it's still too complicated. It still does rely on some income reporting. Are you fair tax people here? Anybody? If we're not talking to the choir, okay. I think that because there is still income requirements or income levels, we still have to have income reporting. So we don't get rid of the IRS or the income tax system with the fair tax. What's the answer? I think that we should go toward a consumption tax, a sales tax, and get rid of the income tax. I think that property taxes are one of the more fair taxes. I think if you own property, you probably should pay for the roads and pipes in front of your house. I know that's not a popular libertarian sentiment. I'm a moderate, and that's one of the things I'm moderate on. And there's probably a better way that, you know, there can be another idea that we can replace those property taxes at some point. The income tax should go first and replace it with a sales tax. And then you also have the benefit of instant or more immediate response by the community, because if we're paying 20%, something like that, to start to get us off the income tax roll, people are going to be outraged. Why are we spending so much money? Why are you taking 20 cents on the dollar that I'm spending? This is crazy. And it'll naturally help us gain support to cut back the government.
All right, we have time for about, I think, maybe one or two more questions. Okay. Do you believe in the idea of nullification? And if so, in what cases would you consider it? And if not, why not?
Yes, that's a difficult question. Nullification is basically nullifying a federal law. In the federal system, once the federal government has legislated an area, they have supremacy over that area of law. Let's take the marijuana. The federal government has placed marijuana as a Schedule I drug, which means there's no medical use for it at all, like cocaine, heroin, meth. And we know there's a medical use for it. There's over 700 medical uses for it. They have documentation. This last Sunday and Monday, CNN had a big program on the medical use of marijuana. But it's a slippery slope. Kansas is doing some nullification now. The guns made in Kansas doesn't need the ATF number. Well, the ATF says all firearms made have to have the number. But we're saying we're not going to do it. So it's a test case. It's going to be litigated, and it's a little bit dangerous because as soon as you take a gun outside the state of Kansas, you have an unlicensed, unregistered firearm, and it's a 5-year mandatory federal penalty. You know, my grandson could inherit a gun. He doesn't know it. It comes across, and there's no way to track it. It gets stolen. So, you know, I have some problems with it. I think there's a way to do it, but it's a slippery slope. I think, though, each state is sovereign, and we've lost that in the United States. And so when we start telling the federal government that these group of states is going to nullify a particular law, we need to be careful how we do it. And if we're going to have a statewide nullification, Colorado is nullifying the pot marijuana laws. Eric Holder, our Attorney General of the United States, said he's no longer going to prosecute marijuana cases. We do a lot of drug work in my county, and around 2,000 cases that used to go federal are now state cases. So it's an unfunded mandate. They're going to use our courts, our defense councils, our jails, our penitentiaries, our health services while they're in jail. You know, the federal government's laughing all the way to the bank. You know, Colorado had to close 3 of their state penitentiaries because there just wasn't space for them. The federal government's trying to rent them now, you know. So nullification is the last act of sovereignty that the states can enact. And we have to move the states back to that, but we got to be careful how we do it. And I think right now, Colorado, Washington, 21 states have legalized medical use marijuana, 2 states have legalized it for recreational use. We'll see how that goes. And I don't like the gun issue because there's such severe penalties for it. But I do support nullification. I read Thomas Wood's book. He was speaking 2 Tuesday nights ago at Washburn. It was great at the time. He didn't actually speak on nullification. He was speaking on economics. But you know, if you have a chance, read his book. I think that you would agree that nullification is what the Founding Fathers gave the states the right to do when the federal government comes so far out of control. So.
Good.
So as part of my campaign, we would be engaging in the education campaign that the Libertarian Party wants to do. They want to use the platform, the public access to tell the public about constitutional rights. One of the things that I think we should push is jury nullification. The notion that you as a juror have the power to decide not only whether the defendant is guilty, but whether the law is a good law. And I think that while our legislative system catches back up to public opinion and popular opinion, we can use jury nullification in the jury box to change the course of how things are going in Kansas. I think it's a 5-minute conversation that needs to happen in front of groups just to educate registered voters who are also eligible jurors of their rights. And if you don't believe that a law is good and fair and should be, then you have the right to vote not guilty. So there's the politics part of nullification, where we as a state are telling the federal government we don't recognize this law. And then there's the personal level. I think that'll really appeal to a lot of people as we bring them in, that this is how we can empower you as a person, as a voter. And it'll resonate.
Chris brought up a very good point. Jury nullification is when we have a trial and they find the person guilty, but they don't find the law